Hey guys, it's Sam, and I promise you this is the last of the 2020 videos. This is my 2020 book awards, and this is slightly different than my 2020 favorites, and that's why I did the two separate videos. I asked you guys at the end of 2020 what you preferred, and you guys kind of wanted both. So I live to serve. This is a tag that I did every year and is from Kayla of Bookadoodles, who no longer makes videos, but is still one of my good friends here on BookTube. She makes board game content if you guys are interested in her now. But this is sort of like an awards tag based around the Oscar categories. So you will see the similarities here between Oscar categories and these book categories that I'm doing. But because of that, this allows for a little bit more variety than just my favorite books. There are some of my favorite books on here, but I get to talk about a lot of other books I read in 2020 that had a really good aspect, such as a favorite character, really good world, things like that. There's even book covers on here that maybe wouldn't get mentioned if it wasn't for the book cover being really pretty. So let's get into that. First is Best Male Protagonist. And I do not read a lot of male protagonists, actually, so this is a little bit challenging. But I have to say Fitz Farseer from Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb. This is one of the first books that I read in 2020, and I was finishing up the Farseer trilogy. So I read the first two books about Fitz in previous years, and I love Fitz. Fitz is such a good character because he tries to be such a pure-hearted soul, and Robin Hobb just destroys him over and over and over again, and it's hard to watch, but he's so good. He has two different kinds of magic that are really interesting. People around him are really interesting, so I just really dig him. And yes, I promise I'm going to be reading more within the Elderlings world. I just don't own the books. Someone help me like with this disconnect stuck point that I get of like not being able to read books that I want to own, because I can read books from the library that I don't own. But if I want to own them, I want to wait until I own them to read them. It's like a whole thing. Anyway, going on a side note tangent, but Fitz, my sweet, sweet baby. And my second favorite male character was Cyril from Amnesty by Laura Elena Donnelly. This is another series that I read primarily in 2019, but the last book I finished in 2020. And this series is so interesting, but I haven't talked about it a ton because I didn't like the last book as much as like the very first book, and I think I like the second one a little bit more too. But this is a speculative series set in almost like a Great Depression 1920s, almost like an Art Nouveau era with like gay spies. And it's extravagant and really fun, and Cyril is this like super gray character that's done some messed up things, but is just a downtrodden man at this point, and I just love him, and I just wanted his happiness throughout this whole series. Then we have Best Female Protagonist, and I read primarily female protagonists, but two did stick out. First is Mia from the Nevernight series. I read books 2 and 3 in 2020, and Mia's just great. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. She's my bisexual death-worshipping assassin, and I appreciate that about her. She loves a good vengeance quest. She's goth. Like, there's really, what's not to love about Mia, okay? And then we have, drumroll please, Tessa from The Winter of the Witch by Catherine Arden. Of course, like I mentioned in my favorites video, she is this bridge between the magical world and the real historical world in this Eastern European inspired fantasy series, and I just adore her. I mean, we watch her through the whole series. This is the final book, and just her arc is amazing. I've already gushed about this a lot, and a lot of you have told me that you've decided to pick this up because of me, so thank you. Then we have Best Plot Twist. And I don't read a lot of books that like hinge on plot twists, so I was having a hard time with this one, wasn't remembering a lot of them, but I think the one that stood out to me was The Queen of the Conquered by Case and Callender. This just was so unexpected from what I thought going into it, and what we were going to get at the end, and just by the end and all the commentary here. This is a fantasy story set in the Caribbean, almost like a Caribbean-inspired setting, and our main character is a black woman who is in this position of power, but not quite, because the like white colonizers don't accept her. She oppresses her own people of the island, and it's just like a really interesting but kind of messed up at times tale of like what's going on with her. So there's a lot of twists and turns in here that I wasn't expecting just based on what I expected going in. So really dug this. I do want to read the second book soon because it's now out. Then we have Best Book Cover. And this was actually hard too, because I remember in previous years when doing this video that I had a very easy time talking about book covers and things, and now like yes, there are so many beautiful book covers, but like I don't get as attached to them as I once used to, maybe because I've been so betrayed in the past by good covers. I don't know. But I would say the most beautiful cover of a book that I've read this year was House of Salt and Sorrows by Erin A. Craig. I mean, just look at this. This is the Owl Crate Special Edition, but the main edition is totally fine too. It's just so pretty. I will say a runner-up with a completely different art style is Gods of Jade and Shadow by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. I mean, look at that. Like, that is just a whole vibe. Then we have Best Male Sidekick. And the two sidekick categories I also had a hard time with because I don't feel like I've been reading a lot of books with a lot of like prominent sidekick characters. I remember so many like sidekicks from other books that I read in the past, but this year not so much. So I will say the one that kind of stuck out as like a true sidekick, not just another main character, because that was the thing too. A lot of books that I read had like multiple main characters, but the true like sidekick was the little mushroom spirit in The Winter of the Witch. He's adorable. I mean, if you've read it, you'll know he's just her little fan, and he feels like a sidekick to me. Then for Best Female Sidekick, I sort of did a cop-out because there are sidekicks in here, right? There's like so many characters. And that is Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. I'm not choosing anyone in particular because there's so many characters, and like I mean, I can't even tell you all their names. There is a family tree in here, but I'm not even gonna go into it. There's a lot of characters in here, and I did like a lot of the female characters in here, so that's what I'm going with. Even though I can't name them, like, but again, as far as sidekicks, this book probably had some sidekicks in it, right? Am I cheating? Then we had Most Unique Plot/World, and I have a few to talk about here. First, we have the Imperial Rock Trilogy by Ann Leckie. I read the second and third book this year, and this is a adult science fiction series, and our main character is a ship. Like, she used to be a ship. She's an ancillary, which is basically like a human body that was used by the ships and the people that like made the ships to have like part of the ship's consciousness in it. But before the first book, her ship is destroyed and she's the only remaining ancillary, so she's the only one. So we have these ancillaries. Also, everyone in this like empire, galactic empire, goes by she pronouns, so you have no idea what the genders are, like as far as gender expression and things like that. Like, we really don't know, so that's really interesting. And it's just this like very different sci-fi world in the way that it's written and everything else that I find really fascinating. Even though this is a much slower series than I expected going in, it's not as action-based as I thought. It's a really interesting world to kind of steep in for a while. Then we have Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. I've seen this on so many favorites lists, and yes, it's so well deserving. This is inspired by pre-colonial like America, maybe more like Central America, but really before any kind of colonization happened, and follows three different main characters. One is this intended vessel for a crow god, one is a siren type character who is currently a pirate, and one is part of the like sun priesthood and is sort of in charge of that part of the like world and civilization and stuff, and they're sort of the ones in power right now. There's a lot of political stuff happening. So interesting. So awesome. The mythology here, the magic, everything, the characters are super cool. Like, it's just great. So this was a great kickoff to a series, and this world is just phenomenal. I'm sure you've heard a lot of people talk about it. Very well deserved. And the last book in that category is Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. Again, didn't quite make my favorites list, but so close. This, as I'm sure you know, is lesbian necromancers in space, but the whole world is just so interesting. We have all these different planets that all these different necromancers live on, and they do different kinds of necromancy, and they're in this one planet, in this house. It's kind of like this haunted space mansion, and there's like weird experiments that happened and just dead stuff and like bones, and there's just a lot. This is a very interesting world, and yeah, a lot of people have talked about it. It was a pretty big hit in 2019, so I'm sure you know about it, but just cool. If you're into the goth stuff, very cool. Then we have Best Book to Movie Adaptation, and I don't tend to watch a lot of adaptations, but I did watch a few this year. But I think my favorite one is gonna have to be the 2020 version of Emma. I needed this. I watched this like early quarantine, and man, was this the breath of fresh air that I needed at that point. This is a perfect juxtaposition for me from the 2005 Pride and Prejudice, which is my favorite adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. I know. This is like, it's that feels so much like fall, that Pride and Prejudice does, and this Emma feels like spring. Like, it was so great. The costumes and the acting just like stands out so well, and just like all the interpretations there, and it was funny, and I shipped it, and like it was just, ooh, it's just so good. So I watched it twice back to back when I first saw it, because I had it to rental for like 3 days when, you know, we were doing the whole like rental at home kind of thing. So I had the rental for 3 days, watched it back to back, and I now own it on Blu-ray, which doesn't tend to happen. So I adore this book to movie adaptation. Then we have a book that you think would work well animated, and that is Akata Witch by Nadia Korafor. This would be so much fun. I picture this kind of like an Avatar: The Last Airbender type series. I think the people and the magic would be so cool animated, because sometimes they feel sort of animated. There's some very interesting characters here. The way that the magic works, this is would it be middle grade? I think it is technically middle grade, maybe it's young adult. I think it's young adult. Fantasy series, it's a duology. And our main character discovers that she has magic, and magic in here is juju because it's inspired by African folklore mythology. Got a frog in my throat there. But the places they see and the people they see and just like the different cultural things that they see, again, I think would work so well animated and in person as well. As far as a story that I felt like would really be very like bright and work well animated, this came to mind. Then we have a writer you discovered for the first time this year, and I'm probably gonna list off like just a ton of mostly romance authors. We have Talia Hibbert. I started reading her Brown Sister series this year. Get a Life Chloe Brown, Take a Hint Danny Brown. Case and Calendar, who I mentioned earlier. I want to read more of their stuff, but I do like this Queen of the Conquered series thus far. Then we have Lisa K. Adams, who does the Bromance Book Club series. I read the first 3 books in that series that are all out now. And Jen DeLuca, who wrote Well Met and Well Played, the first 2 books in this Ren Fair series that I really dig. But I discovered a ton of new authors last year. Those are just the ones that stand out the most. Then we have Best Action. Don't think we can talk action without talking the Nevernight series by Jay Kristoff. I mean, duh. But besides that, I would also say The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. This first installment of the Stormlight Archives is just, there's a lot going on. It starts a little bit slower, but like some of the action scenes, I mean, they're in a war. So we have a lot of these like war scenes going on that we get to see, and that sticks out still. Like a lot of books that I read, I didn't remember a lot of the action scenes, but this I did. Then we have Best Novella, and this was a year that I actually read some novellas, so I could talk about these. The first one is definitely The Deep by River Solomon. This follows Yetu, who is a mermaid. They are the descendants of the slaves that were thrown overboard on the trip over from Africa to the Americas to be sold. So that is based on that folklore, and Yetu is their memory keeper because in their culture they give their memories to one person who then holds them, and it kind of like really wears them down. And then I think one time a year, one time maybe every like 3 years, they have like a day that everyone gets to remember, but then they kind of like put it back away. And it's this whole discussion on that like cultural generational trauma, memories, all of that. So this was fantastic for being such a short book. And then we also have Little Weirds by Jenny Slate. This is a book that I read on audio and Jenny Slate narrates it. I don't know if you would consider this a novella because it's technically like a memoir, but it's very short, so I just kind of put it in the short book category. And this is not a book that I don't know, it's weird, but some of the lines in here about just like identity and like love and some of the stuff are just so poignant and good that I do kind of want to own a physical copy just to like mark those and pull them out occasionally to be like, wow. And then we have Best Standalone. These are also not going to surprise you. First we have The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I know, I looked through and I was like, are there any other standalones that like really grip me as much as this one and the other one I'm going to talk about? And no, in fact, there's not. The second one is Beach Read by Emily Henry. I had both of those in my favorite books of the year, so I will link those on the screen for you guys to check out my in-depth thoughts about them. And lastly, we have Best Nonfiction. Myself, along with a lot of people on BookTube around like June and a lot of things that were happening, really started diving into more nonfiction about racism. I still could read a ton more. There are a ton that I have waitlisted at the library, but I read this on audio. I really like Ibram Kendi's style. I've referenced this a lot in my personal life as well as in my life as a therapist when talking to people about race and things. I think this is really great for pretty much anybody. If someone's like new to this topic or nonfiction books in general, this is not a book that really gets bogged down, really good on audio, and just very easy to sort of follow and understand if someone is intimidated by nonfiction. And the second nonfiction book was Weave the Liminal by Laura Tempest Zakroff. This is a witchy book. I talk about witchy books more on my other channel, so I will link that down below if you guys are interested. I did a full review for this book. But this was a year that I looked more into like spirituality and spiritual practices and stuff, and this is one of the books that I read this year while doing that, and I really dug it. I liked her style. I liked her style of spiritual practice. Again, not religion. It's different. I'm not religious. But I found this book really interesting and are the kinds of books in this genre that I like to read. So that is it for my 2020 book awards. Comment below, let me know some of your favorite books in these different categories. Now we are done with 2020. I know it took me like almost the whole month to talk about things about 2020, but like I said, I do love a good recap month. So now we are onward and upward into 2021 things. As a little teaser, as a little treat, I do have a lot of videos planned for like vlog reading of a lot of different like themed books. It's just to get you kind of interested in what I got in the works. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye.